Good morning. Till the last lecture, we had discussed about socio-political history, the expressions, the styles of the Italian landscape. Now, I will show you some examples of the Italian landscape styles, Italian gardens, as collected from the historic documents. We will not be able to cover all, but some of them which are noteworthy to understand the Italian gardens, I am going to present now. Please follow through. Let us just see a little more detail in the Medici Villa. I will go a little faster in this. This villa, which has been placed in the hill edges, almost reminds me of the Spanish garden that General Life. Now, similar line, but each one of them has a different character. This is regarded as the first true classic Renaissance villa in Tuscany. Simplicity in design and harmonious in proportions. Design is simple, but very harmonious. There are ornamental pleasure gardens. Now, at different places they have placed it, and the gardens had to be laid out at various levels because it was in the hill edge. This gave rise to one typical style. In this, they had the pergolas which came in. Here, if you look at it, they are natural pergolas. But later on we have found that this pergola has become one of the strong structural element in our, or say, landscape elements in our normal current landscapes or contemporary landscapes. Let us look at the section as we found in the references. We have the villa, we have the caretaker house, and this level changes were structurally made stable with the buttresses of the buttressed walls, stone walls. Okay. So, this is the upper terrace, then the lower terrace. These are retaining walls. Entirety was a landscape site that they have created. It did not have a grand staircase. It was a villa, not a grand public building or the palaces or something. So, it has did not have grand staircases, but it was connected, all the levels were connected with small staircases with intricate details. So, from reception rooms on first floor, the guest could go out to the loggia and from there to the garden. So, it is from here you go to this, then to this. That means you have the exposure to multiple such levels. And the loggia connected again the interiors and the exteriors. So, that is how they have done it. Here, I will not say that they have blended the architecture and landscapes, but they created a connectivity from the architectural space to the landscape space, again to the architectural spaces that was created here. The typical picture of this particular cross section, if you look at it, these levels are, the first level is here. This building you see at this particular picture as if you are looking at straight at this particular building at the upper level, upper terrace, and then the lower terrace. In this, if you look at it, the upper terrace, then the lower terrace, and then the green zones. Look at this, which we have tried to highlight. The lawns were large, rectangular, and they had the potted lemon trees. This was placed at the highest level, and then the next level, and then the next level, and there is another garden here. Okay, let us see one by one. On highest level in front of this, the placement is very appropriate. The access is from this particular side, and this avenue is lined with cypress trees. and then we have a view from this particular point to the front. Next is this secret garden, which has a large fountain at the center. Now, let us correlate. First, we come here, we have a foreground, and then we have the structure at the base, and then we have a secret garden aligned. Next level, we shift to this. This is that secret garden which you can see in the picture of the secret garden, you'd see here. Then comes the next one. This is built quite later in 20th century. Now, another garden which has been created, very geometric, with a very geometric, strong geometric styles and geometric patterns, but most often you will find that they are of very flat grass lawns. In between what they have done, where my cursor is now, they have created pergola. This pergola you can see here. So, basically, if you look from this particular point towards the right, this is the view that you have the pergola in this left hand side, and then you have the lower garden which is at this particular point, which is well parted. The pergola. If you look at the pergola from this particular side, you have a view of this. Here I had pointed out earlier that the pergola that they created was essentially, to protect the orchids. But later on, the pergola became one of the important features, because it also not only protected orchids, it also protected the people from strong sun exposure. Let's look at the Villa Madama. The garden is placed here in 3 terraces. The upper terrace beyond the secret garden of Loggia, it is curved. Chestnut trees were planted in upper terrace, and below these trees the orangery was planted. Now, if you look at this, essentially again the level changed from one to another. The other side had the formal garden and the potted plants. See, essentially again correlate with the classical style of Italian, terraced, very formal, potted plants, multi levels, formal. This is the artist's impression of the Villa Madama, and this is a true picture of this Villa Madama. If you look at this, you will find that they have very strong garden here at this behind, they have very strong garden here, and the building sits in the center. What's comparing with the other elements of Italian garden is they have large plantations over here, but when it came to the garden, it was very low height. They did not create a kind of jungle or woodlands in the foreground. So, essentially, if you try to see how it looks like, I'll just try to give a sketch on this particular paper. Conceptually, the building is here. There would be landscape on this side, there would be landscape on this side, and the rest of the edges are filled with large plantations. This is the building. It may be in the center or it may be at the edge. This is the garden, and here is again the garden. Very geometric. If you look at it, it's very, very geometric, very formal. Okay. Then different pictures of these gardens. Let me point out something here in this picture. See, this is partnered with one particular garden, but in between again they have subdivided into small squares and different kind of labyrinths. So, the labyrinths or the maze that came in here. What is that maze? Look at this particular sketch that I am doing. Basically, it is a different kind of movement patterns in which people play hide and seek. So, people move around all these and ultimately play hide and seek. So, this is what is maze or the labyrinth, and the labyrinth became one of the landscape elements. I have seen this use of labyrinths in many of the landscape styles in our contemporary situations. So, here we have such pottery with small labyrinths. These labyrinths where you can see one another, but the paths are very much in the maze form. Then we have the structures and the path which is going towards this, and then we have the hedges in front, the sides. They have the walls. Then also there are grottos having a overlooking water body in front, or the structure in front of that, a garden. So I've shown you this picture earlier. Okay, now this is the kind of situations that you do see in Italian landscape style. I can assure you one thing, that when the Italians they started building each of these particular portions in almost independently. So there is no symmetry or balance between all these things. There could be various different kind of formations. If you look at the other examples of Castello, this is one of the very important example. The garden plan was based on harmony and order. If you look at the geometry, if you look at the actual things, yes, it is there, very much there. But if you look at the whole garden, it never holds together. It is a grandness which they wanted to demonstrate. So it was slightly political wisdom of the people. They wanted to show their dominance of the rulership to the common people, that the ruler owns, ruler possesses, it belongs to him or her. That was a kind of idea that was there. So it was a slightly political, with the pleasure, of course. It was the, I would say, it's a demonstration of political power through a pleasure garden. That was the kind of thing that was there in the Italian garden styles. The garden was filled with lots of statutory, historical, as well as if they had to demonstrate or highlight the actions of somebody, or maybe they want to appreciate somebody. That's what they have done. They have the citrus garden. This citrus garden, which contained more than 500 pots of lemons and orange trees. So basically, one is a citrus garden, another garden with the statues, another garden with another pottery with hedges, another pottery with flower beds. That was the kind of thing that they built. So it was never really a very strong harmonious thing. One interesting thing that is to be noted here, the hydraulic system, the movement of water, that was very interesting here in this case. I will now bring some reference with earlier examples that I have cited. Here what they have done is, they built a large reservoir at the upper elevations, filled it up with water, then allowed this water to flow down by gravity, and that water flowing down through gravity through bronze pipes ultimately came to all these spouts or fountains wherever they wanted. So water was first stored at the higher elevation. It was not natural. Interestingly, this example I have seen in one of our historic examples of India, that is in Deeg garden, Deeg, very close to Bharatpur sanctuary. If you ever get a chance, please see this. It is almost a hybrid of many of the landscape styles, but still I feel that it is very much common to, or very close to Italian styles that they have done. The scale is small. What they have done is, they have built a reservoir at the upper level, and through a ramp they had allowed the cattle to carry the water and ultimately pour water in this reservoir, and this reservoir, then water is released through pipes to the fountains over here, and the fountains would be spouting the water at this particular point. So this is the natural science that they have adopted. In Deeg, I am referring to. Given an opportunity, sometime I will show you the picture, the plan that I have somehow managed to get of Deeg. But here I found this is nothing but emulation of what Italians have done long back. Okay, so here the hydraulic system, which was basically wonder at that point of time, that the water is coming from higher elevations by gravity. As I mentioned just now, that it was, the garden was designed or created to show a political message or send a political message, but in the guise of the pleasure. So there were guests who were invited, and the guests were taken around the garden to show a power of that particular ruler or the garden owner. Interesting. What are the features? Let me go a little faster. The fountain of Hercules and Antiochus, the fountain of Florence, grotto of the animals, citrus gardens, herb gardens, they were different elements in this Villa di Castello in Tuscany. Look at this particular picture. It is that fountain of Hercules and Antiochus, in which the actual sculpture is placed at the top, and then here we have the stone fountain, then you have the base. So the water is to go up to this level and then ultimately flow down from here to here to here. So basically it's a flowing of water from one point to another. And around the base also we have the marble statues, and this is the basin in which the water is to come in, and that is to flow down to the different places. In Fountain of Florence, this was located at the upper garden. This is almost like, to emulate or complement the fountain of the Hercules and Antiochus. Then comes the grotto of the animals. This is the grotto, the cave that has been created, in which they had placed the animals, and here this particular basin has the water which spouts through. Now there are many such kind of grottos over here, in which that there are different such kind of animals that they have created, and then the basin that has been created over here. Then comes the citrus garden. Huge number of citrus trees over here, and they are grown on wooden tubs. So wooden tubs, stone tubs, and such kind of pots came into our elemental list. And then comes the herb garden. This particular herb garden, which nowadays we are also emulating in many of the landscapes, we are trying to create a garden we call herbal garden, full with medicinal plants, so that they have created long back, so many years ago. Quickly going through the water features. The statue of Apollon is here, which is sitting in the midst of this lake, and the water flows from up here and ultimately pours water from this particular point, which is connected with the pipes. Highly technical, and they have done it. This particular positions of the statues is very specific, but essentially this flowing of water from the higher elevation that they have adopted in all these fountains here. Okay, let us see the other highlights. Water flowed down from the reservoirs through bronze pipes. This water then they connected with the grottos and all other walls, and there were spouts. So this idea of spouts, though we have seen in the coat of lions long back, this idea of spouts through animal faces, that became almost synonymous with European landscape styles. So the fountains worked on gravity. So the water was taken to different levels. So I am just showing you one by one these examples. Just to highlight the water feature here, essentially, this slide has been created for you. But the idea is that at different parts of that particular garden, they have created different kind of fountains, different level of fountains at different heights. And the water flowed from one to another to another to another. That is how it has been designed. Quickly going through Sacro Bosco at Bomarzo, Lazio. This is another example that we have picked up for a reason. This is a landscape in which they did not intend any very specific plan. So if you see all those geometry, formality, the orderly, the harmony that I talked about in the Italian landscape style is absent here. It's not there. They have placed things at different places wherever they could. I'll just give some examples. What they have done is they have introduced the different kind of sculptures. The sculptures are not harmonious. Whatever was imagined by the ruler or the sculptor, that was created, appreciated and placed in the garden. So they were placed in different parts of the garden, almost unorganizedly. But that also became one of the landscape style. But this particular landscape style is not true reflection of the Italian landscape style. So I have just given this example for one reason, that it should not be treated that Italian landscape is non-harmonious, non-geometric. Here it is just one occurrence, or maybe I would say it's just a chance that by which this has been created. But it is also very much liked by people. The visitors, even today, they visit this and they prefer. Now here I find one very interesting blend. The blend is what? As in the Japanese garden, we have found that there are different components which you have to experience by moving, and that movement which we call as kinesthetic movement, and that kinesthesia that is being generated, it is also being generated here. So if I see that, if I try to be bold enough to say that this has been probably created with the emulation of the Japanese garden style, I am not very sure. I am just trying to think aloud that have they also tried to break away from the typical geometric formality to little informality, but with their specific elements to be within it. So the statues are placed very haphazardly wherever they could, and this is also being tried today. In nowadays, statues of the stones or the rocks to emulate as a rock outcrop are being placed slightly haphazardly so that it looks natural. Maybe that they want to create something like natural, but once the statue came in, the naturalness totally got destroyed because nature doesn't create statues. So this landscape style, if you try to ever correlate with or maybe try to compare with Japanese landscape style and try to say it is similar, I would strongly disagree on one point: the statues are the spoiler. If they would have done the whole thing with greens and other things, probably it could have been slightly a reflection or maybe an emulation of the Japanese garden style, but here it is not. So the layout is really, this is a tourist map from which we have collected. So the actual layout we do not know, but however, if this is a kind of track where people do move, it simply indicates that it is absolutely haphazard. And quickly going through some of the elements. If you look at all these examples, you will find there is no correlation. No one statue or any element is in conformity with the other. It was a pure unique creation of each of these elements, which either the ruler has conceived, then crafted or drafted by the sculptor, or the sculptor or artist have conceived and created, ruler liked it and said, put it here, bring it within this particular site. It happens like that. So it does not. This only thing is, what is important is to note is these sculptures became important element in the Italian landscape styles. Some more. I am just holding these slides for a few more seconds so that you can see this. Small theatre of nature, turtleback, I have found this kind of sculptures or similar kind, not the same emulation or copy of the sculpture, but the similar styles. Basically, it is thematic. Each sculpture speaks of something, some themes, some historic evidences, or maybe some principles or some philosophies. So each sculpture remained independent, but they had the siting within these landscape sites. Hence, whatever you have discussed over the Italian gardens, let me just quickly summarize this. Italian landscape style, which is to our chronologically quite recent. It's on a grand tract of land, generally steeped in nature. It was developed through the concept of Renaissance. During the Renaissance period, they were strong expression and exploitation of the nature. They used grand paths, very symmetrical layouts, large plantations at the back. They have introduced sculptures within the landscape, and they very intelligently used the water flow from the higher elevations to the lower elevations, reserving or rather storing at the higher level reservoirs and then allowing it to flow by gravity and activating all the fountains. So, the fountains becomes very strong element. Comparing to the Mughals and the Spanish, the fountains were the low keys. They did not have higher fountains, but in this they have used the higher fountains. Now, this is a character of Italian garden. Profiles are very geometric, very orderly, not blended with the architecture, but or the structure, but is just sitting next to the structure, either in the front or the back, maybe flowing farther down frontward. That is the kind of landscape that we have seen. It is maybe similar to Mughal landscape style, but very contrary to Chinese and Japanese landscape style. But we have seen one example which is very similar to Spanish landscape style. So, what happens is the whole set of landscapes gradually got evolved over time, but the identity through sculptures became the identity of Italian landscape style. Thank you.